All right. Hello, everybody. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Welcome to Comics for All. We're a YouTube channel that highlights comics and all the people who are involved in making and writing about comics. And today we have Joel Meadows from the UK. Thank you for joining us. I know it's in the afternoon where you are.
Thank you for
But
having
if you
me.
can give us just a couple minutes and introduce yourself and how you got into the world of comics.
Of course. Well, it started with the magazine. We started life as a fairly basic fanzine back in 1992. We used to cover comics and music, and then we switched to comics and film in the late 90s. We dropped the print magazine for a little while because it was hard to get advertising and distribution was a challenge in sort of 2013. We picked it up again in 2020. We'd also launched a website in 2015. So we've been around for 33 years. And since 2020, we've been expanding into publishing comics and graphic novels as well. And it's initially our Sherlock Holmes original graphic novels, but we're moving into other people's content as of probably next year.
That's exciting. I guess my first question that kind of to start us off with is what was the first comic that truly resonated with you as a reader, particularly a young reader, if that's when you started? And do you still see that particular title influence your work today?
One of the first comics I read as a kid was probably something like New Teen Titans by Marv Wolfman and George Perez.
Oh,
Around
so
about
good.
issue sort of 2 or 3, and I remember reading it and I was absolutely blown away. I mean, I used to borrow Marvel comics from my brother, things like Avengers and Spectacular Spider-Man. But I remember reading New Teen Titans, and I remember reading X-Men Teen Titans by Chris Claremont and Walt Simonson. Again, it was slightly later, like by a year or two, but it's an amazing book. I'm not sure if they influenced me quite so much now, but certainly when I started reading comics, they were a huge influence on me because I thought New Teen Titans was interesting because it was like a Marvel approach to a DC book, and
Right.
it was before your time. It was a huge hit when I was a kid. It was a massive book. It was the biggest seller, the biggest DC book at the time, and it was an absolute phenomena.
How long of a run did that go for? Do you recall how many
A
issues it
long
went?
time. It ran for sort of 8 to 10 years. They did like a
Wow.
spin-off book, and they brought the characters back. But yeah, the Wolf and Perez run ran for a long time, and it was huge. It was a very popular book.
That's fantastic. Kind of jumping off of that, how did your early experiences as a comics fan shape your approach to kind of the publishing and the journalism that you do today?
I mean, I was very lucky. There was a comic show called UCAC, which used to be in London, and we used to get a lot of big guests. We used to get people like Bob Kanigher, a lot of British creators. Because what was lucky was that when I was a little bit older, in my late teens, Vertigo started, and we had lots of people like Grant Morrison and Pete Milliken and Frank Quitely, and a load of great British creators who would come to this show. So you'd have local people plus a few Americans like Howard Chaykin and I was lucky. I got to see it as a fan, and then we started the magazine as just as a fanzine in 1992, and there were loads of people that I'd met, and I sort of built up my sort of working relationships with them, and I was very lucky. I got to meet a lot of these people and sort of build things up, and I had a go at writing some comics, which wasn't a great success in my sort of late teens. They were pretty awful, but people were very kind. I had a correspondence with the late great Alan Grant, who used to write Lobo, and he did Batman and Judge Dredd, and he was very kind and very generous with his time. And I had a correspondence with Neil Gaiman as well when he lived over here,
Ah,
and so I got feedback. They were terrible. I was in my late teens. I didn't know what I was doing, but they were incredibly generous. With their time, and so that sort of formed it. And then we launched the magazine, and Holmes has been in the planning for like 25 years basically, but we put it back for
wow.
a while. So all these things that they all feed into all the things that I do, to be honest.
Excellent. Kind of going kind of where you're at today, what advice would you give to publishers and creators hoping to make their work more accessible to a wide multi-generational audience?
That's a very good question. I guess you need to look at what interests you as a creator, either as a writer or an artist, and then look at how you can, bring it, to an audience. And you've got to be reasonably adaptable as well. I mean, the nice thing about crowdfunding is you could do stuff now that would have been impossible because you would have to sell it to a mainstream publisher. But now you can do your own thing and you can build up your own audience. And things like social media really help. And things like this, you can
Yes.
talk to people, you can spread the word about your work. So it's in some ways it's kind of it's democratized. It's made it sort of harder, but also easier. with this. So yeah, just but be quite focused and really come up with a plan of what you want to do, but be realistic. If you're starting something, I mean, what we did with Holmes is that we started it with three short stories, sort of 6 to 8 pages, and they were really well received. So we thought we'll do a whole story. This is like 156 pages
Yep. And there's
put
volume
together.
one.
Exactly, that's the volume one.
Woohoo.
So I'm very proud. It's taken about 2.5 years to create the two graphic novels, as it's taken 25 years from the very beginning. But you have to be a little adaptable, and I'm very lucky because I've got advice from people, and I've managed to garner sort of quotes from other people in the industry. But as I said, be realistic with people's expectations. I think that's key.
Very much so. Kind of shifting to really the focus of this channel is comics
Mm,
accessibility.
yes.
Um, what do you feel like or believe the biggest challenges facing the accessibility of comics for new and younger readers and those kind of the readers who have been reading for a long time? Kind of where do you feel the accessibility of comics is at this time, especially in the European market where you're at?
Yes. Well, I mean, it's difficult because there are so many different things fighting for people's attention now. Because you've got video
Right.
games, you've got streaming, you've got film, you've got TV, you've got computers, you've got mobile phones. So it's about how to engage with, the audience. It's become harder, but just trying to create quality material and to build up your audience. And if people like your stuff, then we found this that they'll come back to your material. And as I said, it doesn't matter if you start small. You start with like a, I don't know, a 24-page comic or even an 8-page short, but to build it up and to show that you mean business basically with your with your comic or your graphic novel or your series. I think that's really important. And you start with baby steps and you just keep building it up. You can't you shouldn't kind of run before you can walk. I mean, we did the same thing, and you build it up and you build up your confidence. And I think that's a really good way to build up an audience for your work.
Absolutely. And one of the newer formats that I've seen in terms of accessibility is doing like graphic description of a comic. And there's only a few instances I've seen it, but I would love to see more and more of that, especially for the because my wife works for a braille library,
Yes.
and they only have a few comics. One of them, oddly enough, is Mark Wade's Daredevil,
Oh,
and Mark
really?
Wade is
Interesting.
actually doing the audio description in addition to the dialogue. So it's kind of a almost like an audiobook for
Oh,
a
wow.
comic book, but it's also describing the visual of what's going on in the panel or the page as well for the person who doesn't have the visual to.
That sounds fantastic. That
So
sounds
I would
great. I
love to see
mean,
even more of that going forward too.
we will look into that. Definitely look into the logistics of creating that, because you say comics should be accessible to all, and just because you are partially sighted or have no sight at all, it's important that people should still be able to enjoy the comics that are out there. I mean, there's no reason why not.
Absolutely. And then another thing too is that there, especially for Braille, people who like to read Braille, there's
Mm.
actually e-Braille now. They have a reader on
Oh,
like an
wow.
iPad or a tablet, and it's so sensitive that actually it can make the indentations on the screen like it would feel like physical Braille. So the technology is coming, and the accessibility and the price point is going to come way down. So I think in the near future, I'm hoping to see more publishers kind of offer a format of their comics in that form, which would be fantastic. I'm sure it's pricier on the back end, but like you're
Yes.
saying, to make sure that anyone can read or get into your titles,
Oh, yeah. I
ultimately,
mean, why not? I
that's the
mean,
most important
everybody
thing.
should be able to read and enjoy, even if they do have certain sort of things to overcome. I mean, why not?
Absolutely. And then for on kind of on the business side of what you do,
Yes.
how does Tripwire Magazine and Tripwire Comics, how do you work to ensure that content is appropriate and engaging for as much all ages as you can?
We try. I mean, Holmes is a slightly older audience, sort of like
Yes.
late teens, because there are certain things, especially in the first book, and I guess in the second there's a little bit of violence and there's some drug use in the first volume. Because I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it to a really young audience, because I think there are certain things in there that they would find disturbing.
Right.
But as I said, we're looking at other projects which would be more accessible, to a younger, more general audience. I mean, Holmes, it's one of these things where we've sort of made it up as we went along in a way, because we didn't know if we were going to publish this themselves. We did approach a couple of publishers, and they weren't interested in it, so we decided, what the hell, we'll do it ourselves. But we're certainly not averse to creating or publishing other people's work, which is of a more general approach in terms of the audience for it. So it's very much has been kind of a learning experience with this. And we
Right.
want to widen it out. We want to publish other people's work. We're looking at finalizing like a new talent competition next year.
Oh, there
We're
you
going to
go.
offer it to people who'll be able to submit their work, and it's possible that some of that work might be for a more general readership for a younger audience.
And then I had a follow up to kind of like when you propose these ideas to publishers, big and small,
Yes.
when they decline it, is it reasons like for Sherlock Holmes, it's because it's like a public domain, or are there other reasons why they decline it? Or I don't know if you can share any of that.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, some of it, I guess, is down to personal taste or whether
Gotcha.
it fits in with their publishing schedule. And obviously, it's their prerogative. It's their company. So, I wasn't always told, when we were turned down. But as I say, it's given us the impetus, and we decided to do it ourselves. And I'm very, very proud. We've managed to create, two amazing books, and we've had some incredible people to do covers and pin-ups, and we've had some incredible feedback, great queer quotes from everybody from Guillermo del Toro to Jeff Loeb,
Yes.
to Kelly Jones to Brian Talbot. So an amazing range of people who've read it and enjoyed it. So in some ways, I feel like it's almost the publisher's loss.
Yeah, no kidding. I've read it myself. I own a copy. I highly recommend it. It's definitely one of the best Sherlock stories I've ever read. I haven't said I've
Thank
read a
you.
lot of Sherlock lore, but in
Yes.
terms of storytelling, pacing, art, it's spot on. It
Thank
really
you. Well, I
is.
tried to make it quite cinematic. I mean, the approach is
Yes.
it's a comic, obviously, and it hopefully it plays to all of the strengths of a comic. But I've also tried to make it, almost watching a movie. There are elements that I've tried to make very cinematic.
Right. And someone who reads a lot of comics, I appreciate when the story is written that way because it helps visualize and helps set the pacing for the story and kind of set the expectations of how things are going to happen. And I really
Yes.
appreciate that. So my next question is again kind of more on the publishing business side of things.
Yes.
In your career, have you seen changes in the way comics are rated or categorized by age, and how do you feel about those changes over time?
A little bit. I mean, I think people are more comfortable with things that you might have seen. It's the same thing with movies, stuff that's perhaps a little bit more violent than the things that we used to see when I was a kid. I mean, the world has changed a lot. I mean, the magazine's been around, for 33 years, and things have changed so much. And I
Yes.
think people are more comfortable with stuff that was a little bit more kind of out there, when I was a kid. But the world has changed, and so I think people's approach to material, to content, whether it's movies or comics or TV, is very different now, and it has to adapt. The the rating systems and things, they have to adapt, to a changing world.
And then my follow up with that is kind of like when you're creating a title or working on a title, do you have those age restrictions in mind, or is that kind of like does that play into the format or the content that you add or don't add to a specific work?
Well, a little bit. I mean, as Holmes is basically, I think it's aimed at people who are kind of 15 and above. I wouldn't feel
Mhm.
comfortable giving it to somebody who was younger because they wouldn't really appreciate it as well.
Right.
I don't think they'd be comfortable with some of the things in it. So, um, I mean, I haven't created, loads of comic projects as yet, but, for a younger, or if I was deliberately creating something for a younger audience, I would obviously bear that in mind in terms of certain things that I feel wouldn't be appropriate, to show because of the, the age range of the particular project.
Absolutely. And kind of rolling into my world is a comics librarian, and I'm sure you got to
Yes.
experience them too. What role do libraries and schools play in introducing comics to younger readers, specifically over where you're at? And
Yes.
what can publishers and creators do to support those efforts even more?
I think libraries are fantastic for kids. I mean, it's a great way to get kids to read. And
Yes.
comics is as well. Comics is a great entry point, for kids who might be a bit uncomfortable reading, like a novel or something, but they could pick up a Batman or a Spider-Man or a comic, and I think it's really good. I mean, publishers, I know that they do work, with libraries, and I guess just keep working, closely with libraries and offering, a range of different content. I mean, I have a friend who works for Magdalen College, Oxford. And he's setting up a comics library,
Oh, that's
which we've
great.
submitted homes to, which is fantastic. So obviously that's a slightly older readership, but I think libraries are amazing because people, especially people on like a lower income, they can't afford because comic graphic novels are not cheap these days, but they
Yes,
can go in for free into their local library and they can see some amazing content. They can read, the classics. They can read, V for Vendetta and Watchmen and Dark Knight and Mouse and all these incredible books, and they can do it for free. So they can, there's no barrier. They go into their local library or their local school, So I think as long as the schools or the libraries have a good range of different books, then I think the sky's the limit, and I think it's a great entry point for kids.
absolutely. And ultimately, I think too, for creators and publishers, one of your goals should be to get on library shelves because, like you mentioned, that's going to be your biggest readership ever. You're going to
Yes.
find
Oh
people
no, I
will
mean we're
find your
looking at.
work.
I haven't quite cracked it yet, but I'm looking at ways of getting homes into libraries. I haven't got there yet, but I would love to see it in public libraries. That would be amazing. I'd be very very pleased about that because that would be a great another audience for our book.
Absolutely. And especially in the library market, the physical distribution and digital distribution are two entirely different
Yes.
planets.
Yes.
But a lot of the times, I just tell creators, especially if they're near a public library or have a card already, find
Mm.
out what their purchase suggestion process is for
Yes.
purchasing new things and just submit your own titles and see what happens. If
Yes.
they say no, then okay, well, no, that's great, but why? What's the reason why my title can't be
Yes.
in?
Yes. Exactly.
A lot of the
Yes.
times libraries unfortunately won't provide that information, which is kind of frustrating.
So they'll just say
But
that we're not going to accept it at this time, but they won't give you a reason
right.
necessarily.
Well, a good example too is like my last library system, pretty large, metropolitan, 28 libraries.
Blimey.
Even if the copy, a donated copy, was brand spanking new, they wouldn't
Yes.
take it, even though it
Re-
was brand new and would be ready to add to the collection.
Oh,
Um,
really? Oh, how
yeah, so
strange.
they would only add things that they actually purchased in donations, even if it was a title they had or a title that got
Yes.
damaged and they needed to replace it.
Oh, how odd.
They very odd, yeah. So for whatever reason, libraries are very unfortunately reluctant to accept, donated copies, which I think is a barrier that needs to be broken down. Because I feel
I
like there's a lot
agree.
of
I
creators
agree.
and publishers who would love to provide, even free of cost,
Yeah, of
to
course.
provide your titles. And hey, if I know that my title is going to get placed on the shelf and cataloged properly, yeah,
Yes.
I'll give you 5 copies for free.
Yes. No,
So
no,
I think it's
exactly.
definitely a barrier that I'm hoping that we can break down over time.
Yes.
My next question is: are there any particular stories or creators you've covered through the magazine
Yes.
that you feel have significantly expanded the reach of comics to new or kind of underserved readers, people who may be reluctant to pick up a comic book?
Well, I think there's so many. I mean, going back to sort of the 80s when you have things like the aforementioned Dark Knight and Watchmen and
Yes.
and that was an amazing time because comics were huge and they were getting to an audience of people who had never read comics before, and they became almost kind of like rock stars at the time. And those books I think are still really important. They're still really kind of foundational for what we have now because without those books you wouldn't have things like Thought Bubble over here, which obviously is a show that focuses on comics. And so I think books like that. There are so many. I mean, the people I've interviewed over the years, I've kind of lost count of the people I've spoken to or the stuff that we've covered. But there were so many. Even something like Hellboy, which is amazing. It's if you think about it, apart from the big two, I'd say Hellboy and The Walking Dead are two properties or characters that are really broken out of comics, and they are well known to the general reading or viewing public, and
Yes.
that is an incredible achievement, to be honest. So there's a lot of I mean, I did a interview with John Muth about Moonshadow, the book the epic book he did many moons
Yes.
ago with Jeremy Demasis, and it's a big anniversary. I think it's 40 years, and that was very different because that was a painted comic, and again that brought in a whole new audience, and he had people like Ray Bradbury and Kurt Vonnegut, these incredible, huge literary figures who admired. So I think all of these books they all fed into the increased interest in comics and to bring it to a wider audience. And there's so many, and as I say, I can't even remember, there's so many people I've interviewed over the years, people like Grant Morrison and Pete Milligan, obviously, when they did their work for Vertigo and beyond, they've been bringing
Yes.
a whole different approach to creating comics. And so it's been the last 30 plus years, it's been pretty amazing, to be honest.
I love hearing that. Something too, I think, because libraries have a responsibility of not just buying the popular stuff,
Oh
because
no, of
everyone
course.
knows what the
Yes.
popular stuff is, but
Yes. Yes.
finding the titles that are maybe not obscure necessarily, but are just not as widely available. That accessibility, smaller publishers, even
Yes.
publishers like you mentioned, like the by Two Moros, with the comic market and the way it is, especially in the U.S. with the folding of Diamond.
Yes.
Libraries, we're having a hard time figuring out how to obtain physical books. And Tomorrow's, I think, filed bankruptcy already, or they
Yes.
lost all their distribution money essentially. So even like you're saying, these new reprints of classic titles that have really gotten people involved over the decades are having a hard time
I mean, actually, I thought
reaching
one book. I
market.
thought of Craig Thompson's Blankets because I went to a talk with him last
Yes,
year, and that was a magnificent book. And I think it's a great entry point. People who aren't necessarily comic fans, but
correct.
I think it's a really accessible and it's a really interesting story. And you've had people like Daniel Clowes, and you've had Charles Burns, and these amazing US indie creators, and over here people like Brian Talbot with his Granville books and Luther Arkwright. These are quite unusual because they're not what you'd call kind of mainstream in the old-fashioned way, but they brought readers in, and Talbot is a multi-award-winning creator around Europe, and these are projects that are very different, and they are projects that we wouldn't have had in comics sort of 15 or 20 years ago.
Yes.
So I think it's really exciting, and these people, they built this amazing groundwork, and I mean, it's been tough. I mean, Craig Thompson talks about things like AI, unfortunately, which has had an impact
Oh
on
yes.
things like this. And obviously, the market has kind of shrunk a little bit because, financially things have been tricky the last few years, but it will survive. I mean, there's always these stories of comics, the market collapsing in the industry. And that's not going to happen, but
No.
it will adapt. But it has been a bit of contraction, unfortunately, the last 2 or 3 years. As you say, you mentioned Diamond as well, but hopefully with, Luna picking up some of these people, that things will
Yes.
settle
Yeah.
again,
I'm hoping that
hopefully.
the two big ones, Lunar and Filbo, um,
Yes.
and I think unfortunately there's a lot of retailers and stores that are kind of skeptical of this new distribution landscape. I'm hoping they give these guys a chance and
I
hopefully
think
give
they'll
them
get
an
used to it.
opportunity.
A lot of shops I know have already switched over to
Good.
Luna, and it's just adapting to something new. And a lot of people they're reticent to do something different, but if there's no alternative, and Luna is showing that they can do a good job, that they can step in and give people the books. And I think they're very good customer service as well. So that helps. So it's you just have to adapt, and I think people will.
Absolutely. And that kind of goes into our next section of kind of what the next or forward thinking kind of next steps kind of for the
Yes.
comic industry. How do you view digital platforms and new formats such as web comics and reading within apps themselves, like global comics and things?
Yes.
How does that change the game for accessibility and age diversity? Kind of like really, like you're saying, trying to reach, not with every title, you're not going to reach all ages, but
No.
your titles in terms of your total content should be reaching all ages in some way.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's good because if there are kids who's never bought a physical comic in their life, but they have a tablet or their mobile phone, then it's so easy for them because they're always buying things, like in-app purchases and things, so they can go. I
Right.
know that like Neon Ichiban, which is the Comixology, no, sorry, that was a distillery's new digital platform that will give people access to a lot of big publishers. So I think it's good. I mean, there were people worried a few years ago that digital would replace physical, but it's not going to replace it. But I
No,
think
it's just a
now it's
supplement, really.
complementing it. I think it's
Yep.
complementing it in a really nice way, and I think it makes things a lot more accessible, to the reader. As there's someone who's never been used to going into a shop and buying a physical comic or graphic novel, they can just download it to their tablet or their phone, and then bang, suddenly it's there, and it's instant as well, so it's great. So I think for accessibility, I think digital is really good, and I can see that improving and growing, and just as I said, it works hand in hand with the print format, but it's never going to replace it.
Right, and especially with library digital platforms like Libby and Hoopla, it
Yes.
provides huge readership opportunities. Because, like you said, anyone with a device of any kind, a
It's
tablet, phone,
brilliant. I mean, there's no
desktop,
barrier. It means it's because if people don't, as I said, people aren't used to buying physical books. They've got this thing in their pocket which they can just download it to, and then suddenly, instantly, it's there, and they get a whole library. They can get a whole run. They can get 300 issues of Spider-Man, or
yes.
200 issues of X-Men or Batman. It's brilliant. I think it's really good.
And I'd love to see too, kind of the newer platforms like Global Comics and
Yes,
Comixology.
you're
At
we're
this
on we're on
time,
global. Yes.
they
So
don't provide any library access in terms of. There's a lot of indie and smaller presses
yes.
that put their stuff on there that I would love to be able to read through the library, but I
Yes.
think I'm not sure if that's really even in their realm of what they're looking at
But hopefully,
necessarily.
maybe someone else might step in and offer that service.
Yes.
That's the thing. If they don't do it, then someone is probably already thinking about it.
And then kind of following up, kind of going into the next step is more on the publishing kind of business side of things.
Yes.
Are there any particular innovations in publishing or printing that you're excited for, especially in the Tripwire comics and magazine and print and digital, and getting your viewership to as many people as possible?
Well, I mean, Tripwire is offered through Caffeine, which is a digital platform, and Readly, which is a all-you-can-eat digital platform as well. And we are in discussions with a couple of other people. And in terms of our art books, because we had the George Pratt art book, which we offered,
Yes.
we're planning a line of those. So we're looking at making them quite high end. I mean, our production value has always been very good, but we're thinking about the next level. So, for example, with the Sherlock Holmes novella, we've offered like a limited edition hardback with a ribbon. So we're thinking about doing, not, we can't compete with something like the Folio Society where their books are, they're gorgeous, but they're very,
Yeah.
very expensive to produce. But things like production. But as I said, we're expanding our digital reach, which I'm really excited about. So just to get more and more people to look at it, and if people don't want to buy, a physical magazine, offering them the opportunity to do so via these digital platforms. So yeah, I mean, we're always looking at new ways of getting stuff out there.
And then my follow up with that is, especially on the business side, like getting on those digital platforms, is the price point pretty high for publishers, or is it accessible in terms of money just to get in?
It varies. I mean, some publishers don't charge you anything up front, like Readly. They basically give you a cut after sales. Other places do charge you either a monthly or a yearly subscription. So that's,
Gotcha.
you have to crunch the numbers with that. So it does depend on the platform. We're on global. We don't get that many sales, so I don't really promote it that much, I admit. But I'm quite pleased it's up there.
Excellent. And then you kind of touched on this a little bit, but in terms of the age ratings and accessibility of comics, is there anything that you would change or like to see kind of modified to help kind of get more titles and more things out there? Or are you pretty happy with kind of with how things are set up right now?
I think I'm happy. I mean, as long as it's clear, what the age is, what the books are aimed at in terms of the age range. I think as long as that's really clear, so you're not buying something which is inappropriate, for your son or daughter, and then realize that there's things in there. So I think it does seem to me that it seems like it's in quite a good place. I mean, a few years ago there was a lot of discussion about this,
Yes.
but I think the publishers are much more savvy now in terms of labeling and in terms of what the books, who they're aimed at. I think they're much better than they used to be. They're much more kind of clued in. So I don't think you're not going to get somebody picking up, like there was a book called Faust, which was quite a violent comic. I think it
Mm-hmm.
was in the 90s, and I mean it wasn't mislabeled, but these days I think that people are much more, as I said, they're much more savvy, and the publishers are much better at presenting and saying this book is suitable, for your 13 or 14-year-old son or daughter. So I think labeling is in quite a good place, personally.
And then this is a question I didn't have written down for us, but um, if someone is wanting to get into publishing and creating kind of their own works, because like you mentioned, Kickstarter and other platforms are really providing
Yes.
a huge gateway for single and independent creators to get their books to not necessarily the huge distribution market, but you can get direct market to customers. And kind of how do you view that as a tool going forward, and kind of what its limitations are too?
Well, I mean, it is very useful, and the thing is, you can make things work. The economies of scale are such that you can actually do things on a smaller scale, but you can still make enough money, to produce this stuff. I mean, I guess with the more product and the more content on things like Kickstarter, there are more things competing for people's attention. So I guess that's a good and a bad problem. But I think it's interesting how things have changed. I noticed a lot of projects, they get started on something like Kickstarter and then get picked up by a bigger publisher. So
Yes, I've seen
they
that
act
happen.
they act as like a proof of concept to show that there's an audience and there's interest in this. So that's great. I think it's actually worked in some ways as a like an open door to indie creators, because in the old days you'd either get picked up by a bigger publisher or they wouldn't touch you at all. But if you have a project now which has been a success, on something like Kickstarter, it proves that there is an audience, and
Right.
so I think it's been really good. I think it's been really beneficial for kind of like the indie sector. It's exploded in the last sort of 3 or 4 years, really, and it's been pretty amazing.
Excellent. Do you have any particular creators that you haven't got to work with before that you would love to work with?
Oh, there's loads, to be honest.
I'm
I mean, I'm
sure.
going through. I put a list together. I mean, I've interviewed him, but somebody like Frank Quitely, who's always very busy. I'd love
Yes.
to get a cover from him, but he doesn't do that much in the way of commissions these days. So somebody like him, I mean, there is a long list. There's a lot of people. I'm talking to a reasonably big Marvel artist, possibly about doing the cover for the third home thing, but I'm not going to mention him because it's not 100% at the moment, but he seems interested. So
Got it.
I've been talking to Kevin Nolan as well, who seems interested, but he's always very busy as well. So I guess I'd mention him. I would love to do something with him.
And kind of going off that, can you give us what you can share with us? Kind of what Tripwire has going the next 6 months to a year. Kind of what fans can expect.
Well, the George Pratt art book is currently in production, so it's being designed. That'll be out for the first quarter of next year. Our archive book, which is currently on Kickstarter on late
Yep.
pledges, that'll be out probably around about March next year. And Sherlock Holmes Volume 2 is at the printers, so that'll be back later this month. So, excuse me. So there's a lot of things happening, and then there's some other things that I'm sort of planning for next year, but they're not quite finalized yet.
Excellent. Well, Joel, is there any closing thoughts or anything you would like to share before we finish off for today?
Well, no, just we've been very lucky. We started the magazine, and we moved into the comic publishing space, and we've been very lucky that we've had such amazing support for that. So I feel, I do feel lucky that we have the support, and I've got to do some stuff which I may not have, imagined doing a few years ago. Yeah, and so the last 2 or 3 years have been pretty amazing.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Joel, and thank you for being
It's my
on
pleasure.
Comics
Thanks for
All.
inviting me on, and good luck with the show.
I know. I'm really excited to see where this goes. And again, this is a Comics for All channel, and the idea is just to promote comics and all the people involved who make them, who write about them,
It's a great idea. It's a great idea.
and to make sure that those accessibility aspects are also discussed. And I think we did a wonderful job with that today. So otherwise, everyone else have a great rest of your day, and we will see you next time on Comics
Brilliant.
for All.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Right.